Well, hello everybody, and we're back. Welcome to the brand new series of confidence conversations. And I'm really excited. This is somebody that I've been meaning to invite on for ages. So welcome to Noelle. And we're going to talk about menopause, but I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do in true kind of like blind date style for those of us that are old enough to remember
Oh,
that.
oh yes. So I'm Noelle. I'm 51. I'm married. There you go. It's a bit like that, isn't it? Yes, I have two children. I have two girls who are going through puberty as I go through perimenopause. So that's an interesting combination.
Wow.
And I don't know if you're going to see this back to front on the camera, or guess we'll
Yeah.
see, but I am
Yeah.
Blueberries and Jellyfish, or better known as a women's wellness coach. Menopause is one of my specialisms, partly because it's just really interesting. I still think we're in the very early stages of learning about it. And frankly, women still today don't get enough support. So
And I'm really interested to talk to you, obviously, about the menopause, but also and perimenopause and everything that goes with it. And that's fascinating as well that you've got your two daughters as well that are heading towards that age of puberty, isn't it? But I'm also really interested in the link with confidence, because just before we press record here, I think we talked about, I don't do any editing on the podcast for those of you that have listened, because actually that's not how you have a conversation, right? And you said, well, with brain fog, I'm probably going to forget some stuff anyway. So let's just go with and see what happens. The first thing I really want to know is, where did the name for your business come from?
So when I set up my business, 6 years ago now, I didn't just want to be a personal trainer. So that's my kind of foundation training. I always wanted to specialize in women's physiology, because we are not small men, yet the world treats us like small men. And certainly in the world of fitness and exercise, everything is tailored towards men. It's getting better, but it's still got a long way. So my first specialism was pelvic floor health, and Blueberries and Jellyfish is one of, or say two of the visualizations I use when it comes to connecting with your pelvic floor. So let's try this quickly. So imagine you're picking up a blueberry with your vagina, because it's small, it's delicate, it's very specific. Yeah. And then the jellyfish is when you add the breath, because the breath comes first when it comes to pelvic floor and core health. And if you imagine how a jellyfish kind of swims, I guess you call it.
Yeah.
So you would exhale and lift your pelvic floor, and you would inhale, soften and let go. So you'd exhale, lift, and inhale, soften and go. So it's just two cues. There's lots of different kind of cues, visualizations that I would use. So
I love that
it's
one.
a fun name. Had a bit of fun because Noelle Moyler PT is frankly a mouthful and a bit dull. So,
I love that. And one of the things that I always remember about you was we were at networking a while ago. I think it was Last Friday Club. So shout out to Last Friday Club. And your pitch was about a pelvic floor. And I think you said, didn't you? We've all got one, even men. And the guy that went after you was like, apparently I've got a pelvic floor. And the look on his face was just, I was like, right, you definitely won that pitch that day. That was brilliant. I was just like, he was so shocked. And then he went on to do, I think it was the same guy, went on to do the rest of his thing, and he got really confused about whether he got 3 wives or 3 children. I think he was still thinking about whether he got a pelvic floor or not.
I know, it's brilliant. Well, for a lot of men, it doesn't really affect them until maybe they might in later life, or things like sadly prostate cancer, but it affects 1 in 3 women. So
wow, yeah, those stats are incredible, aren't they? So moving on to confidence then, just stepping outside of that for a second, what does confidence mean to you?
Everything from not giving a bleep about sometimes what people think of you, and especially that, I think that tends to happen more as you get older. I often will get clients to have a virtual, I'm not going to swear, but an F-it bucket. And then I encourage them to put things, and maybe even sometimes people, in that bucket, because I think we spend too much of our time caring and worrying what other people think. And actually we need to be true to ourselves and more, or sort of, authentic, really. Confidence is just having a go and not minding if it all goes Pete Tong, if you fail, because actually we all learn from failure. In fact, if anything, keep failing. I mean, I can't remember how many times, but it was the chap from Dyson. I'm sure he said, I failed something like 3,000 times before I was successful. And that's what it's all about. So that's about confidence. And I think specifically when it comes to sort of me and women, I mean, I changed careers. I'd worked for IBM for 21 years, and I changed career, completely different career. And it was terrifying. But I just kept thinking, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work. And then I try something else. So, yeah. And I think being brave in this sort of age that we're in is really, really important, because we start to become more anxious and more worried about things. And actually, we need to use that as an opportunity and flip it on its head. So,
and it's really interesting because I was chatting to somebody yesterday about we've both been trainers. Well, she still is a trainer, and I've obviously done training in my former career. And I'd done something last week out in the Netherlands, and I'd never been out to the Netherlands to do for work before. But saw it as a good opportunity, stepping out of my comfort zone. I really enjoyed it. But we were talking about how in the olden days, when we used to not really plan where we were going, we didn't have sat nav. We used to kind of look at the map and go, oh, I'm heading up this way, that way. And actually, none of that really seemed to bother us, did it? We just did it, and we just went off and didn't really think about it. And we were saying now, as we've got a bit older, you know, I mean, obviously we've got Google Maps and all of that can help us. But I'd left myself enough time to get there. You know, I did quite a bit of hanging around because I just wanted to make sure I was on time. And we were questioning whether, does that come from an age thing, or does it come from a place of, I know what works for me now, or is it a combination of the two things? I don't know. I don't know if you've got any views on that.
yeah. I definitely think if you've experienced something a number of times, you just naturally become more confident with it. And I think it's the first few times you do something new, it's that almost like fight or flight, or freeze even, you know, am I going to try what's going to happen? But, you know, once we got over that first thing and we keep doing it, it's absolutely fine. But yeah, oh God, I remember having a big old AA route finder in the back of my car. Somehow reading it and driving, you know. So.
I did see something ages ago. I think it was after one Christmas, and my dad always had a really great sense of direction. Well, still does have a really great sense of direction, and I think I inherited that. But there was something on social media that said something like, oh, here's me driving with my dad and him going for the map and me going, calm down, Indiana Jones, we've got Google Maps.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
how times have moved on.
I know how times have changed. What drives you to do what you do?
So I think, what originally drove me to change career was after having my eldest daughter, who's now 14, I had a pretty crappy birth, and I've had a pelvic injury as a result of that. And I found it so difficult to ask for help because it was embarrassing. And then B, find the right sort of help. When I eventually did, it was like that nirvana moment of woo. And when I decided I kind of had enough of the corporate world and I wanted to do something different, I had numerous things up on a big A4 sheet in my office, you know, just really random stuff. I thought, forget what qualifications and all the realism about retraining, just stick any idea up. And this working with women around pelvic health was one thing I had up. So that was the thing that drove me originally to kind of go, let's go and retrain. And I think what drives me now is, I guess, seeing lots of women who are having changes in their lives, changes in their bodies, getting frustrated because they either can't find the information out there or trusted information out there, or find the right person to help. And they're feeling lost. And maybe they start to lose their way in terms of their health, their well-being, mentally and physically. So that's what drives me on now. And the fact that I'm just a bit bloody minded. So
I love that. Determined, I think I would use determined. Yes, determined.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to explore this idea around how the menopause, perimenopause, menopause, how it affects confidence. So tell me kind of, I guess, what you've seen or what you see in your clients is the link.
It can kind of fall two ways. I think the majority of the time, women begin to lose confidence because not only do our hormones fluctuate and they have or cause symptoms, our brain changes. And in fact, I'm starting to learn even more about that. I'm just reading about, I'm just looking at it's on the floor here. There's a new book that came out about 2 weeks ago by Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who's a neuroscientist, called The Menopause Brain. And she stresses how much that menopause isn't just about the hormones, it's about the brain. And so, we start to become more anxious about things that we always were quite comfortable doing. So maybe driving is a big one, going out at night, say trying new things, but then also things like brain fog, forgetting our words that we just know, forgetting people's names, being that fountain of knowledge either in your everyday life or work career, and suddenly feeling really insecure and inferior because your brain just isn't working the way it used to. And then, your body changes, let's be honest, and therefore feeling less confident in your body because things start to ache. You don't recover as well. You're eating and exercising the same way you used to in your 20s and 30s, but God, the scales are shifting, So that all these kind of things, I think, tip the scales in terms of losing confidence. But then sometimes I've seen women almost fight that and say, that's it, I've had enough with this career, or I've had enough with this relationship, and they make big changes in their lives midlife. So it kind of can go both ways. So
Wow. Okay. And I get this whole thing about confidence, because confidence is situational, right, and subjective, isn't it? So it's going to mean different things, like you've just described there. That for
absolutely.
some people it's, well, I was going to say smaller and larger, but that isn't, because some of those things will be big for, again, it's different things for different people, isn't it?
Yeah,
What do
yeah.
you think are the most common symptoms that affect somebody going through the perimenopause and menopause? Or do we just call it one thing? Do we just,
Well, it's interesting. So, I mean, there's kind of different phases of the menopause transition. You've got perimenopause, which is potentially up to 15 years leading up to menopause.
wow.
Menopause is one day. It's the one day that you haven't had a period for 1 year. But often people go, hey, that's it, I'm in menopause. And then 3 months later, they'll have a period. It's like, and then post-menopause, again, is when you've consistently, you've stopped having periods completely. But again, that's very subjective, because there are some women who can start to have symptoms before they're officially by maybe GP or the NICE guidelines definition in perimenopause. And then you can have women who maybe are, as a lady I was talking to yesterday, a friend of hers is 65, and she suddenly started having really bad night sweats and hot flashes, which she'd never had before. And yet she's been through and is very much postmenopausal. But in terms of common, I mean, statistically, I guess you could look at, I mentioned hot flashes, night sweats, but I think it's all the ones that people don't like to talk about. So it's more the brain function changes, because you feel really uncomfortable and uncertain in yourself. And obviously we talked about the confidence piece, that has a real knock-on effect.
Yeah, and I guess there's a point probably where you start to think, is this my confidence, or could this be the perimenopause? Could this be, that I'm entering, or I'm in that phase without
Absolutely.
realizing? I guess and they're in that there starts the questioning of yourself, right? The self-doubt and and how
Absolutely,
that.
because if you look at the symptoms, they could be something else as well. So heart palpitations are a common menopause symptom, but actually, is there a problem with your heart? So who do you go and see to get it checked out? Because there is no actual menopause expert really in the NHS. You might get the odd one, but you go and see, a cardiologist. Or if it was more gynecological issues, you go and see a gynae. But again, they're not necessarily menopause specialists, they're specialists in their area. And that's the problem with kind of Western medicine, is everybody's in their little silos, but never the twain shall meet. Apart from neuroscientists, which seem to be trying to bridge that gap, and then people like myself. So
Well, which leads me nicely on to the point about, why would somebody choose to work with you over going to what traditionally they might see as well, I need to see my GP about this. I think it's quite well known out there that actually your GP probably isn't the best person. Sorry if there are any GPs listening, maybe you could let me know that I'm wrong in that. But I think that's the general feeling, isn't it? That, like you've just said, that they're not specialists in their areas, and actually this is quite a specialist area.
yeah,
So why would somebody
yeah.
be more confident coming to you?
Because and it's very easy for me to say, well, I'm going through it, but then everybody goes through it differently, so that's actually
Hmm.
not a good argument to have. A bit like if you have a baby, you should know how to postnatally train somebody. It's not the same.
No,
It's
agreed.
because I read, research, I've done extra CPD training in menopause with different people, and I'm always just keeping up to date with the latest information. And I very much look at it when it comes to our well-being, we all should take a holistic approach, and that's the same for menopause. And by holistic, I mean all the things that you can control. So a good colleague of mine always talks about controlling the controllables in your life.
Me
So there
too.
are things like, sleep is an issue. Then let's look at your sleep habits at the moment. What about your nourishment, the food that you're eating? So this is not diets. This is about, are you eating the right foods that are helping balance your hormones, that are not spiking your energy levels and crashing them too much, you're getting enough fiber in to help with your bowels and your pelvic floor health. Are you changing the type of movement that you're doing? Because actually we need to change our movement when we come into this perimenopause and onward stage, because our bodies respond differently because of our metabolic changes. So it's a whole host of things. And obviously if it's, well, I want to consider looking at what pharmaceutical options are out there, then I know where the trusted resources are, and I can signpost people to those, documents, websites that I know are credible, because there's a lot of rubbish out there on the world of Google.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, information rich, but quality of knowledge poor often is Google. But also I've
Mm.
built up around me a network of people who are like me, are very much around women's health. They are specialists in their area. So we all sit in our own lanes, but obviously we overlap in certain areas to make sure we're part of that jigsaw puzzle for a woman. So when it comes to GPs, for example, I typically tend to work with private GPs, partly because NHS, rightly so, are not supposed to recommend private companies. But
Mm.
equally, when they only have 7 minutes with a patient, it's quite difficult to do anything other than dish something out, not actually look at the root cause of why these symptoms are happening. Because it may not be menopause, it might be thyroid issue, it could be something
Yeah.
else. So it's about, them getting heard and listened to. And that's really
And
important.
I love the idea of the you saying, well, let's look at actually what it is rather than just looking at one thing and trying to address that when actually it might be something else. And your point,
Yeah.
about first of all, you said, "Oh, I'm going through it." So, but I sometimes think you're quite right, and it's the same with coaching, because often I look at other coaches that have said, "Oh, I've suffered with this, and I've had this, and I've had the other," and actually, just because you've been through it doesn't mean your experience is going to be the same as somebody else's. What's
Exactly. It's like you go. It's like you go to the same party, yet you have a completely different experience at that party.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. That's a great analogy. I love that. Oh, I think I'll be getting that. Um, I read, and you talked about it as well, that you've done something about, and I wrote it down here because I want to remember what it was. The Burrell Education for Menopause. Tell me a little bit about that. Is this part of your CPD?
Yes. So, as well as reading, I've probably lost track of how many menopause books and publications I've read. But Burrell Education is a training organisation, so a CPD organisation run by Jenny Burrell. Hello, Jenny, if you watch this. Lives, funnily enough, happens to live on the other side of Chichester,
Oh,
originally from Birmingham, and then lived in London. So Burrell Education started off predominantly with pelvic health. So training those of us that worked in the wellness space, and this could be anybody from a personal trainer, Pilates yoga teacher, could also be a doula, a midwife, a doctor. So we could learn more about pelvic health to support and use that knowledge to support our clients. And since from that, obviously, there's much more than a woman. And I really like this in this book I've just read. It's not just about the bikini medicine, because women's health seems to be about the bikini medicine, which is everything that's underneath that two-piece bikini. That's women's health, but it's not. This is women's health as well. I thought
wow,
that was
that's
brilliant. I love
brilliant.
that. So
Yeah.
so that was Dr. Lisa Mosconi. I was in her book. And so what I've done there is I've done everything from supporting women with gynecological surgery, so pre-surgery and post-surgery. But when it comes to menopause, I've done a couple of CBD training with Jenny. One which was very much around, it's called Third Age, which is all about that menopause period. And you have loads of guest presenters on there. So again, you're getting the expertise from those in the know. So everything from movement specialists to doctors who've trained with Dr. Louise Newson, to maybe more functional medicine doctors who very much look at root cause analysis, to people who, doctors who actually won't offer HRT, maybe because they themselves have had a type of breast cancer, which means it's not suitable, it's not appropriate. But what else is there out for them? You've got to make sure you're looking at that woman in front of you and her particular circumstances. And then there's a movement program I did with her as well, which is about strength training, mobility, impact on the bones, all that sort of stuff. And it's all very much scientific based. And that to me is really important because I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to data.
No, I love that.
But she's great. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
And so, yeah. So
I was just going to ask you, sorry, what you think about kind of all these celebrities that are talking about the menopause. I mean, Davina springs to mind, doesn't she? But what are your thoughts on all of that?
So I think it's great that she was one of the first people that put her head above the parapet. She even said herself, for a long time, she said nothing about her symptoms because A, she was embarrassed and she thought it would affect her career. Yeah? And that still will and is happening today for women's career. And you don't have to be in the spotlight for that. So I think, her doing the programs is great. I think for me, as somebody that works on the ground with women, it's been too medicalized, and that did something that was it was a recent article in the Lancet last month, I think it was, that said menopause has become too medicalized. And I think that probably it's not Davina's fault, but because of the media tend to focus on the HRT element and Dr. Louise Newson, and they're forgetting that there's this whole other side, the very much lifestyle, I said nourishment, movement, all that sort of piece, which is just as important whether you choose to or can take something like HRT. You've got to do them in parallel, or obviously just the lifestyle, the kind of piece on its own, if HRT is not for you. So I think it's great, but I sometimes think it's not balanced enough. And that's the main thing. And especially because she is a fitness fanatic herself. She hasn't talked enough about that. And interesting enough, for me, she's still too cardio based. She's not lifting heavy enough for her bone health, all that sort of stuff. And
oh my God, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because you kind of think, I suppose our perception might be that she's quite a trusted person because we've probably all grown up with her, haven't we? She's been in our lives so you probably feel like she's, your best mate or whatever. And then to hear somebody like you, who's clearly really knowledgeable, done your research, done your training, to just think about what an influence she might have on somebody that might not be quite right for that person. It might be right for some people, right? But it might not be for others.
Yeah. I think what she's been very good at is she has recognised that, she needs those trusted resources around her. So in the book she brought out, I think it was last year, a lot of it was, mainly written by doctors. And so she's had those people around her, which has been good. I think there's not enough practical stuff in there. A lot of it's too on the surface, really, because you kind of really need to delve behind. Well, why is somebody really struggling with their sleep? And it might be something so deep that needs a lot of time and attention. It's not just a quick fix of, go to bed a bit earlier, or just make sure you don't have that caffeine after midday. It might be something else going on. But that's not so. I'd never knock anybody for highlighting a really, really important topic.
And I sometimes wonder, without those people that kind of champion it, if you like, whether we agree with it or not, I guess some of the things that I've read recently. So I read something, it was probably on LinkedIn actually, where somebody had said, is it right that it's classed as a disability? Well, for some people, I guess the menopause is quite disabling, isn't it? But whether you do want to categorise that in that way or not, but I think there are some things coming in now, aren't there, in the workplace, which I'm a bit out of date with, about how we're managing the menopause. And then also I come to the point of, if right, and God, I'm not into men bashing or anything in that, because they're our best champions most of the time, right? But actually, how do we
Yeah.
help men to understand some of this in a way that doesn't feel like proper cringe?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think a lot of women find it proper cringe as well sometimes.
Yeah.
My daughter's always like, Mum, don't say that in public. I'm like, oh, you'll thank me in a few years.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think the first thing to do is, for any man, is to speak to the women in your life about their female health. So even if they're not, you have a partner, a wife who's 30 or a sister, understanding actually what's their women's health like. How was puberty for them? A lot of women will basically be suffering month in, month out with their periods and other stuff going on. Or maybe, they've lived with endometriosis for 15 years and are still having to deal with it because it's very hard to deal with, and trying to get the right level of support can take on average 8 to 10 years. But just talk to them, understand what's going on and how does that affect them in their everyday life, and therefore what things could be, can any sort of reasonable adjustments be made to help them with that. So just having those open conversations, you can always stick a book in front of their nose, but I think it's having those open conversations about you and what you're going through, because that will be different to Sue, who sits next to me in the office, for example. So
Yeah, and that's a good point as well, isn't it? About, to use your Sue who sits next to you in the office, because I remember a while ago I was working with a male in a female environment, probably a bit unusual, I don't know. And he'd been quite proactive actually, and he'd gone off and got some menopause training, because he said, actually, I recognise that all of these women around me are suddenly going through this change and it's affecting their work, and I want to be able to help them because they're an important part of my team, and actually without them I can't. And I thought that was great. And part of me then wonders, whether this should be included in all line manager training as well. That's kind of where I then went to, if you're running some kind of line manager academy, or aside from us teaching, how to get the best out of your team and understanding each other and all of that, should we be talking about this kind of stuff as well in the corporate environment? Maybe there's, there you go, maybe there's, something in that.
Yeah, absolutely, because 51% of the population are female. Every single woman will go through the menopause.
Yeah.
What type of menopause depends. But either way, yes, I think it's important that everybody in the workplace understands it, and even younger people in the workplace, because I think it's very easy. I remember being young thinking, what's the matter with that person? Or, you can be ageist, not necessarily realizing that you are, and thinking, because let's be honest, when people talk about menopause, the first thing that comes into most people's brains is that crotchety old woman who's sweating in the corner and is miserable as sin. And menopause is just such a miserable thing. Whereas actually, I see it as a transition. It's not a disease. It's not a disability. Yes, there can be very, 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 debilitating symptoms which need to be taken seriously, and the proper help and support given. But actually, I see it also as an opportunity to go take stock of your life and go, do you know what? I'm about to get rid of these damn periods that I've had for all this year. And I'm seeing this as not a fresh start as such, but a fresh opportunity to try something different, to try something new, that I'm not held back by maybe perhaps if cycles and periods have been particularly burdensome on somebody for many, many years. So.
Well, I mean, if anybody in the workplace is listening, we're up for collaboration. We're up to have a conversation about it and talk about it. So what makes up Moyler's Marvellous Menopause then? How do you describe that?
How would I describe that? So the first thing I do is I look at the woman in front of me, and we have a big old chat about, what is going on with her. Why she reached out to me, what is it she's particularly concerned about that she wants to address, but equally flipping that sort of, I guess, often they'll come to you for negative reasons, because there's achy bones, or maybe they saw their parent go through osteoporosis and they don't want to end up with similar issues. But I flip it on head saying, okay, like I said, let's see this as an opportunity. How do you want your body to feel? What do you want to be able to do with your body in 5, 10, 15 years time? I would say that I'm kind of training my old lady body. I'm not training to have a bikini body. I'm training for have an old lady body because I want to be able to go on holiday with my friends or my husband if he's still alive, and be able to lift my own suitcase overhead into that locker. You know, I want to
yeah.
just be able to do stuff in my life. So it's not about aesthetics; it's about being able to do stuff with my body. And then we'll kind of do an audit. So I'll sort of get them to prioritize, well, where are the areas that you really want to address the most, the top maybe 3 to 4. And then we'll do an audit to say, well, what's going on at the moment? And then that gives us the opportunity to sit down and work out a plan. So it's very bespoke, but it's going to contain the key areas that we know are affected by menopause or are important to address with menopause. So bone density, joints, muscle loss. So we go through sarcopenia, which is muscle wastage as we get older, and it's quite rapid. So it's about maintaining muscle mass and actually building it, because a lot of women have a lot less muscle mass than your average man. And so we want to be able to support our bodies moving through life. And it may be, I kind of don't know what to eat anymore because the stuff I'm eating, I'm just suddenly putting on body fat. What's with that? I'm not eating anymore. Do I eat less? Do I go on some crazy diets? Cabbage soup diet this week or intermittent fasting the next? It's so confusing. So, yeah.
Amazing. You reminded me of the cabbage diet. There was something on the other night that was, I think it was the food of the 80s or something. And they made the cabbage soup and I sat there and thought, God, I could actually smell it. It was just, I mean, why we did those things to ourselves back then, I'll never know.
I had a lodger when I lived in South Sea when I first worked at IBM, and she went on the cabbage soup diet for 2 weeks. My house has never smelled. Oh my God, it was yeah.
Oh,
Don't do any crazy diets.
Oh no, don't do any of that. No. Tell me then, and kind of to wrap up, what would be your top 3 tips for more confidence or having confidence during menopause?
So create that imaginary effort bucket, all right? And be quite tough on situations you find yourself in, things you've said yes to, even people. I'm not saying put your husband in the bucket, although sometimes that's probably worth it. But I think we have to we take this opportunity at time to go, do you know what? Should I really be doing these things anymore? Are they just a burden on me, maybe causing me stress? Taking up time when my plate is full already, and I'd like to be able to spend more time going to see some friends on a regular basis, going out for those lovely countryside walks, which really help with brain health during menopause. So I need to be a bit more ruthless about putting these things in this bucket. In a similar vein, being proactive in doing some life laundry. So what I mean by that is looking, almost like having this virtual plate. I often get people to, on a piece of paper, I say, over the next week, write down all the things that you're doing, and see how full your plate is. And then at the end of the week, I want you to be your best friend. If you're handed that to your best friend, what would your best friend first of all say about that plate? And are there things you can totally get rid of, bin them? Are the things you can delegate to give you some more time back for you, not for anybody else to suck up that time, but for you. And then I think the third one would be strength train. Now, strength training, I would say, all depends on 2 main things: your pelvic health status and your existing bone status. But everybody can strength train. Now, that might be body weight or it might be lifting heavy weights. It's so important that we get stronger as we get older so that we can continue to move our bodies in the way that we want to. And you're not going to bulk up. You're really not going to bulk up. That's not what it's about. So
I love all of those. I really like the plate one as well, because actually where I went to in that's a really good activity to do if you're feeling quite overwhelmed anyway, as well, isn't it? Thinking about what's on the plate, what do you want to get rid of. I mean, and also when you think about a plate of food. And I mean, I have a saying that must have come from my childhood about eat the worst first and save the best till last. You know, get rid of that stuff that you don't want to like
Yeah,
eat all
yeah,
the veg
yeah.
first, and then leave, you know, your chicken and your potatoes for, or whatever that is, but do it in that
Absolutely,
way.
yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
those.
yeah, definitely,
So
definitely.
if our viewers, listeners, however people are choosing to interact with this, want to get hold of you, where can they find you? We'll put all this in the show notes, but if you tell us where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a website, so blueberriesandjellyfish.co.uk or .com. It'll also take you there as well. Again, you can look up the same on Facebook, on Instagram. Yeah, and if you reach out on any of those, you will see ways to contact me, either through email or you can WhatsApp me as well. On my
Amazing.
website, there's basically all the kind of stuff that I do. So I try and give enough information to answer the questions initially. But if you do want, you know, to have a much more detailed conversation, then I offer 30-minute discovery calls where people can basically have a chat and ask me as many questions as possible to first of all see if I'm the right person to support them. Because,
Yeah.
you know, you got to gel. It's really
Yeah.
important that you gel with the person you're working with, especially when all this stuff is very personal. So
Really personal. And then if somebody was to wanted to go and buy a book after they've listened to this, which one would you recommend?
oh, two. I brought them with
Oh,
me.
okay.
Um,
And we'll put the
so
links,
there's
we'll pop them
loads
in
of
there.
yeah, absolutely. So there's loads of really good menopause books out there, but I picked these for two reasons. So the first one is a more general menopause book. Okay, so the
Great.
Complete Guide to Menopause by I'm not going to try and pronounce her name. Dr. Anis Mukherjee. I think that's right. Sorry if I got your name
Great
wrong.
name.
So the reason she's particularly good is because this lady is a GP. She's been through breast cancer. She has estrogen positive receptive breast cancer, so she cannot take HRT. So her book is
Wow.
full of lots of great information about what are the things you can do to control the controllables in your life, or the other pharmaceutical alternatives that are in there. And I think that's really important to highlight, because a lot of the books will tend to go straight down the HRT route, and that's not always the best option for everybody. It's not a magic bullet for everybody. Sometimes it is, but it's important to know it's about looking at your whole life as well. So that's a great book.
Yeah.
And then this
Brilliant.
is my newbie, which I've just started
Cool.
reading. So the Menopause
Oh, okay.
Brain. I love neuroscientists. I don't know
Yeah.
why. I think I
Yeah.
just like the way their brains work.
Yeah.
She's amazing. So if you look her up on YouTube, she's got a TED talk. So they're obviously quite
Oh,
short.
okay, great.
She's got such a love. She's Italian, lives and works in America now. She's got such a lovely, dry little sense of humor, and it completely comes out in her book as well. So something which you think could be really heavy, literally within the first paragraph, I'm laughing about, you know, how she describes how effectively sexist, you know, medicine has been from day one, because women's brains are smaller than men, therefore they couldn't possibly have the mental capacity, logical reasoning that men will ever have, you know. So Charles Darwin, thank you very much, and the rest. But yeah, fascinating. And I think it's really important that, you know, people realize it's not just about hormones, the endocrine system.
Yeah.
Your brain massively changes as well. So
It's fascinating, isn't it? I'm going to wrap up in a minute, but just your point there, you know, about men and women. So I'm doing a talk next week. I'm doing confidence hacks, but one of the stats that I've found, because there isn't loads out there about confidence, actually, certainly not confidence in a positive light. It's all about when you know your confidence is negatively impacted. But one of the stats is around men and women, and it says that actually men, hear me out, overestimate their abilities and their performance, and women underestimate. But when it comes to actual performance and doing the actual thing, there's no difference. There's no difference at all.
I saw that in my job. I used to work with graduates and apprentices. I was a manager of the program in IBM, and you absolutely saw that. The lads were all cocksure, but actually, when it came to delivery.
It's fascinating. Look, thank you so much. I say all of my guests are all fascinating, but I feel like we could talk forever, because I think we've like literally scratched the surface, haven't we? But I'm sure, and I'm sure that if people want to have a conversation with you, maybe someone will pick your brains at networking, or they'll get in touch. So thank you, and thanks everyone for listening to the new episode of the Confidence Conversations podcast.